as our world has gotten more conscious of culture and like office culture and culture in the workplace, which I love, I think it's necessary to show everyday people, because you want to show your culture. If you get models and actors, that's not your culture.
All right, welcome back to Exploring Growth and to our CEO series, where I'm interviewing CEOs around the Central Florida area. Today, we're going to dive back into branding as a means for growth. I have the pleasure of talking with Brian Carlson, who's CEO. Brian Carlson Stills in Motion. They've done work for big names locally like Carnival, Biketoberfest, and others that you'd recognize. So I'm excited about our conversation. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's fun to always talk.
Yeah. I've had a couple guests on recently that we've talked about aspects of branding, what makes up a good brand, talking about as it relates to culture, communicating your message, connecting with your audience, all of these things. If we drill down into branding pretty quickly, we're going to get to visuals. And I think this is, aside from maybe some graphic design, fonts and logo, this is how most people think of a brand, and how they connect with it. So, this is a place where I think companies can get it so right and they can get it so wrong. I think it's an opportunity for a company to communicate fit with their audience and make a real connection, meaning we fit with you and you fit with us. And that's just understood. So I want to talk about brand visuals today, and I thought you were the perfect person to bring on. So for context, can you give the audience kind of a little bit about your company, the work you do for your clients?
Yeah. Thanks again for having me on. So I'm a photographer and director. So I direct motion as well. I've been doing it since I was 13, and I picked up my mom's film camera. We went on vacation and I took photos of cows out the window. And yeah, a lot of what I do is branding, branding imagery. So from a Coca-Cola perspective, it's I get a brand book, brand guidelines that has logo, type, font, blah blah blah, color, and then that helps me interpret what they need, and then I work with a creative director or marketing person in the company. For smaller size companies, it's usually a little bit more hands-on, where I'm not as much executing their vision per se, but I'm working hand in hand with the business to discover what is their vision. And yeah, so the closest thing I do, I would say, is I get a library of images is a lot of what I'm doing now. So delivering a library of images that companies can use across all channels, all mediums, and then directing motion. So bringing in my crew and directing, ads, commercials, social media stuff. So yeah, it's a lot of collaboration.
Yeah. Thanks for that explanation. And I would imagine, from my perspective, and having done a lot of work that's close to what you're talking about doing, I realize that it's translating a lot of the value from the brand to the viewer or the audience. And a lot of the work is in understanding what the brand's trying to do and then communicating that to the audience. When I was looking at your website, I noticed a lot of your work revolves around capturing sort of the nature of a real person, right? Like I see real people when I look at the images. It doesn't look like stock imagery, it looks very different. So I think I know the answer to this, but was that intentional, and what was that all about?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you noticed that. That's a compliment. I'll take it. Yeah, I think a lot of that, thankfully, I think we're now in a day, a little bit of, in the 90s, it was very much Cindy Crawford, beautiful woman.
Yeah.
That was all. It was like you had to have a beautiful woman in the photo, and that was it, or a beautiful man. And thankfully, it's changed a lot to where now it's more inclusive. They're including everyday people, all races, all sizes, all ethnicities. So that's a lot of what goes into it. But I also definitely feel that I specialize in working with ordinary people. I like I actually kind of prefer working with ordinary people. You usually can just have a little bit more fun. And so, yeah, a lot of the people I've worked with, they're either talent, but not super seasoned in the terms of what you would think is like talent, or they're everyday people with companies. And yeah, I mean, what I do is a lot of psychology, really.
Hmm.
Um, I always try to bake in a little bit of time in the beginning just to kind of chat, get to know them, joke around,
Hmm.
make them feel comfortable, affirm them, say, hey, you're going to feel really stupid. Like, this is weird, like, don't
Yeah.
worry. We're not going to judge you. We're not going to laugh at you. So, um, yeah, I think making people at ease is super important, especially with what I do, which is photographing everyday people.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that there a lot of the magic comes from the way an ordinary person is acting ordinarily. If a model is there and they're professionally trained to look a certain way, yeah, that's good, and it's good for a certain type of image that you're trying to convey for a certain type of audience. But I think by and far having natural people that are just naturally being themselves, there's a lot of magic that can be captured there that translates to audiences that look and act like those people. I'm seeing this from my side, but I'm curious if you're seeing brands from your side that are actually trying to showcase more actual team members or actual customers rather than using stock.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on right now. Um, Definitely a lot more people. I will say when you use regular people, though, it's important to bake in more time
Hmm.
because and I mean, you can cast anybody. It's just the matter of, do you have the budget to get them near you?
Hmm.
Um, I've worked with some, like, that's not that's why I don't want to take away from what talent, paid talent really does.
That's
I mean,
right.
it's
Yeah.
amazing. Like, I work with one talent on a shoot, and they flew them in from New York, and there was these two women, and they came on set, and we started shooting. Hope you don't mind me telling the story. And this
Yeah.
was
No,
back when I was
stories are good.
assisting, and I they're just like talking in front of the camera, and the photographer goes, "All right, let's go. We'll get ready." And again, I was assisting, and they just turned it on, and it was I mean, my jaw hit the floor. Like, I was like, "Oh my gosh, these are like paid amazing talent." I looked over at the photographer and I go, "This is a lot easier." He's like, "Yeah." So nothing to take away from that, but yeah, I think I definitely see a trend of photographing the everyday people. And I think definitely as, as our world has gotten more conscious of culture and like office culture and culture in the workplace, which I love,
Mhm.
I think it's necessary to show everyday people because you want to show your culture. If you get
Mhm.
models and actors, that's not your culture.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I have this sort of way that I want my clients to understand what good content is. And I try to get them to understand that it needs to be ideally compelling content, something to get someone to stop the scroll, engage more, convert through, or just be connected to what you're saying or what you're doing. How do you approach creating compelling imagery? And I want to know, in light of like, what's your process look like for you creatively? But then when you're working with brands secondarily, how do you translate that to help them understand what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me think how I can say it slightly succinctly. So sorry, I can be a rambler, but I think the first question I always ask is why. Like, what?
Hmm.
That's the biggest. Don't ask the who, what, where, why, when. Don't ask. Leave all the others out. Those don't matter. Those are more logistical questions that can be figured out once you're ready to go into production. But why is
Hmm.
the biggest thing? Like, why are we telling this story? Why
Hmm.
is the story important? Why is it important to me? Why is it important to our customer? Why are we shooting it in this format?
Hmm.
Why are we shooting it with this medium? Why are we publishing it to this medium? I think once you answer all those questions, you start really drilling down, and don't just ask why once, ask why two, three, four times,
Hmm.
because you're going to find out something new. Yeah, I'm a big believer in the medium shapes the message. I read this great book several years back, and the guy talked about how the medium we display our images or our stories in shape how we should tell the message. And that doesn't mean just like, oh, we shoot portrait or landscape mode for a reel or for
Yeah.
YouTube. What that means is that if uh, I did this thing the other day where I was creating some social media stuff for League of Women Voters here, just
Hmm.
about get out the vote, which I love. And so we were doing it, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to shoot this on my iPhone, and I'm a professional photographer, and I and they're kind of like, and they were cool with it, but I told them the reason I want to do this is because if you're looking at your iPhone, the minute you see a polished, beautiful ad, I don't know about you, but I'm like, boom, over it. Like I can
Yeah,
tell it's an ad.
you can smell it.
Oh, I can see it. I can sniff it out,
Yeah.
and so I swipe by. I don't pay attention. But if I see something that not only looks user generated, and I don't mean in the sense of like person talking to their phone, looking at their
Yeah.
phone. I mean like just shot on something that you and I would shoot on. I'm
Hmm.
going to stop for a little bit longer, and that little bit longer is what it takes to tell the story.
That's right.
Again, going along with that, like medium shapes the message.
Yep.
Um, if I'm doing a movie in a theater, I've got a lot longer time to get to the plot. If I'm doing a 15-second ad, like you better get to it quick, and you better have something in the front end that's going to grab people and get people's attention. So
Mhm.
I'm always thinking about like those kinds of questions. And then specifically for stills, I'm thinking about in use. It can be tricky because we're using stills in all facets of everything now. Like a
Mhm.
still, like, oh, we need a banner and we need a this and a that. So it can be hard. But trying to think again, why are we shooting this?
Yeah.
Where is this? Why do we need this image? Oh, we need this image for a banner. Okay, well, I got to pull back and shoot horizontal, and I got to get the people
Mhm.
interacting and all that kind of, on
Need
this side of the
headspace.
frame. Yeah,
Yeah.
give headspace. Do I need to give copy room? Um, so that's really important because you can find stock images out there, but it can be really hard to find. Silence my phone. It can be really hard to find the right one for the right fit.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It's I'm just trying to kind of pull back your brain and take a look in and like creatively, how are you approaching your work, right? And
Careful,
I
careful
think
there. Looking into my brain.
that's right. And we don't want to go too
Yeah,
deep, but
get lost really quickly.
but then the second half of that is okay. That I like that. I mean, because you're starting with the why question, and then you're looking at the medium. That's very very similar to the way I approach things, because you want to get to the story and then how that story is going to be consumed. How do you communicate, or how do you take that process through to the client to get them to see what they can't see, to get them to see where you're headed and where you're taking them to make this a success?
That's a good question. When I work with ad agencies or big brands that have in-house creative directors or production companies, they've usually gotten there on themselves, and I'm brought in to help kind of polish the thing and work with talent and all that kind of stuff, bring my visual expertise. But when I'm not, or when I'm desired to do the front end pre-production of the why and all that stuff,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think I try to focus. I've noticed I'm not great at, I don't want to do aspirational marketing in the sense of like, here is cup, buy cup. Cup will make you happy. You
Mhm.
will be so happy with cup. Um, because it's too easy. And
Yeah.
it's not really true. And I think people kind of sniff through that.
Oh yeah.
I think that was like, if you look at the 50s, right? When it was like, I mean, that was the heyday of the soap, and every spot
Yeah.
was clean because of the soap. So I feel like we've gotten past that. And
It's all
so
features and benefits.
yeah, right. Yeah. And so I definitely try to be more story oriented and
Hmm.
find what is the story and what we're telling. And I think once people can adopt that, they can get behind something. It's kind of the difference between like a Chevy and a Toyota commercial and a Subaru commercial.
Yeah.
Chevy and Toyota sell you aspirational, tough, or whatever, or sexy, or beautiful interior, and they got a beautiful model or whatever. And then, but Subaru does a very different approach, and they sell a culture, and they say, hey, when you buy this, you're buying into this. Now it's still aspirational, but
Mhm.
what it does is it targets people at their heart and more their identity.
Yeah.
And I think that's a better way to market. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm trying to go for story rather than substance over style, they say, but to make it look good.
Yeah. I think, looking good is kind of what you're getting hired for, right? On the surface. But then for it to actually work and have some measure of success, there needs to be story. But I think what we're really talking about is connection, and story is the best way to connect. And these
Mhm.
days, you've got, I think everybody wants to buy something in light of what it looks like for them buying it, how it affects who they are, what it's saying about them. There's an identity, part of it. And so therefore people need to be connected to it. And if they can't connect to it, or they can quickly sniff out how it's surface or fake, they're not going to connect to it. And so I think you're headed down the right path of how getting your clients to understand story and connection. I was talking with a couple episodes ago, Hernan, who runs a Hispanic advertising agency here in Central Florida, and we talked a little bit about culture, and that makes me think of that. People want you to connect with them where they are. They don't want to be an afterthought. In his case, doing the ad in English and then copying and pasted in Spanish, that's not going to really play that well. And I think it's true for everyone. If it started in Spanish and it was secondary to English, I would feel the same way. And so I think meeting people where they are in their journey and of who they are becoming, honestly, it's kind of, that's where we are from a content creation standpoint, marketing landscape. We're at the deep psychological levels, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And I mean, you see it in social media. Like, everybody talks about counseling, and that's more of an open discussion now, mental health. So I think that it only makes sense that you go there with marketing and advertising. But I mean, your thing can be too that, like, we create beautiful, sexy products, like our craftsmanship, but that's the story, something like that. So yeah, I agree.
That's right. If it connects with the audience, then that's the path. So you work with a lot of brands. Where do you see brands missing the mark with visuals? How are they not doing it well? You probably see it all the time.
Yeah, I see it a lot. Oh man, we're always the and this isn't to like down anybody, but we're always the most critical in the industries we're specific to.
Sure.
I would see something and be like, oh my gosh, like, how could they do that? Why would they do that?
Sure.
And somebody else is like, oh, it looks good to me.
Yeah.
I see it a lot in I actually see it a lot in social media. Because again, because I'm more story, again, the medium shapes the message. Social media is intrinsically designed to be something that is addicting and like super the monster the beast that always is consuming. So it's like always needs content. So I've done some shoots where they're like, it's definitely they're aiming for like quantity over quality, because and their sole reason is because we got to put something up. And I understand you need to be in front of people, but I think the opposite of that, to go against what the culture says, which I think is if everybody's swimming this way, I usually want to go this way. And is to say, no, we're going to post less, but we're going to post things that are more meaningful. Now, if an algorithm could just prevent that, whatever.
Right.
But if you make something so compelling that somebody wants to go look at it, then the algorithm doesn't matter, and you've got a really loyal customer base. So I think like that's just different ways of thinking about it. But I think social media, I see it a lot where it's just like we got to get something up there. And that's not the way I try to produce my stuff. But I get it. There's times where it's just that is what it is, Yeah.
Well, the medium really matters, and I'm glad you brought that up, because if you look at TikTok and what's required to get views there versus even Instagram, they're two different mediums, even though they're very similar in nature. And how you make a connection with the people that are there, and some people are only on TikTok, not Instagram. There are some people that are on both. So you're appealing to the same person in a different way.
Yeah.
So, to your point of medium, if I'm on TikTok, the way I'm engaging that is very different than I'm engaging Instagram, very different than Facebook stories, very different than how I'm watching Netflix, a Netflix movie versus ESPN, Plus or Paramount Plus, there's time and place for how my attention is being given and how I'm consuming entertainment and information. And so, I think there's a time and place for the catchy sort of fast paced feed the beast content. but what's the goal? Back to your why question, why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Because if that's the case, then we're not going to produce that same content on even Instagram, or especially not your website or some other places. It's it can't be missed.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, and I think that in such a fast paced culture where we feel intrinsically the need to be on all these different things as a business owners, to be like, oh, we got to be on TikTok, we got to be on this, we got to be on that, we got to
Yeah,
get our name on that.
there's a pull there. Yeah,
Yeah, there's a pull, and I don't. I try not to ascribe to that, because what I want to do is like, okay, where are my customers? And then I want to connect with them there. And if you're trying to do it intentionally, you don't need to have that pull. You don't need
that's
to
right.
be everywhere. You can just go, no, like this is where we're going to be. And then, if we want to expand into this, we can do that. And because we're doing it intentionally, we can say no, instead of just going with the flow of like, well, you're on TikTok, or you're on Instagram, or you're on Facebook, or
Yeah.
So yeah. And also that's like, especially as a small business owner, like I just can't do that. I mean, I could make, social media could be your full-time gig if I had to do that. So I've got to, kind of pick and choose which ones are most valuable to me, and also which ones I enjoy too. Because I think if if you enjoy it, you're going to do it better. If it's a chore, you're just like, you're not going to be doing it, or you won't be doing it for long very well.
Yeah. A lot of what I'm observing, and you're bent towards creating content, is in these meaningful connections. And, there are lots of people selling really not meaningful,
Yeah, of
from a
course.
connection standpoint stuff, products on TikTok where they're
Toothbrushes.
selling the latest hack thing or whatever, and you buy it once and you probably never buy anything from them again.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a flavor for everyone. But I think what we're really dialed into is meaningful connections, because for brands, especially a lot of the companies that I've seen and work with around Florida here, even B2C that are higher volume of customers, making a more meaningful connection means retention. It means, reconnection over time. It means business metrics that map to a longevity and sustainability of a business. And I'm wired the same way. I think about content in terms of that meaningful connection versus a non-meaningful one. And then you start mapping that towards the content you're creating for that result. And you get to images like what I see in your site with real people, real stories, it just makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel it does. I agree. And everybody's different. That's not to knock the guy who's doing the sexy stuff.
Sure.
That's just like probably not what I'm going to get hired for. And that's okay with me, like, cause I'm not the sexy guy. But I'm the guy who will like, crawl into the manhole to take a great photo of a guy cleaning a manhole or whatever. So yeah, it's different flavors for, different people, I guess.
Yeah. Are there any brands that you've worked with or have seen maybe online that are doing it well? Like their visuals are on point with communicating that connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are. I mean, the one that in the community, in the photo community, that like everyone talks about is Patagonia.
Mm-hmm.
They run to their own drum, they beat to their own drum, or whatever. Whatever, walk to their own beat.
Yeah.
I don't know, something like that. They do it. I mean, they'll like publish photo essays about the environment, just photo essays, not about them. I mean, yeah, they outfit the guys, but has nothing to do with, really their company. It's their values and stuff.
Features more a secondary storyline.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, people like, they do really good at it. Again, Subaru, I think, does really good at it. They're the stalwarts like Coke and everything that do great. And there's been some like awesome ads too that I've seen that I'm just like blown away by, that also have like, so my style tends to be, I kind of tell stories at the intersection of heart and humor. And I tend to have a little bit of a dark humor. And also I like absurdist kind of weird stuff, which is good for marketing, because I think that's another way you can get people's attention, is just something that's totally out there. Yeah. There's a great ad for, was it Skittles or something the other day that I saw. It was just so weird. It was like, I think it was actually from 10 years ago, but they do them still, where it's like this big guy walks in a tube sock into a room, and he's like, and these two elderly people are talking to him, and two elderly people are like sweating on a couch. The older people, it's just so weird. It was like,
Yeah.
but it was cool because you were just like,
Yeah.
you couldn't look away. And now I'm
Yeah.
talking about it, and it's Skittles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there was a Chrysler, I want to say, did this amazing commercial, and I found out my buddy actually did the coloring on it, but they did this amazing commercial about their car, but their car was barely mentioned. It was like their car was shown, but they didn't have an ad, like it wasn't plastered everywhere. But it was just this story about the passing down through generations this car, but then also just like the what this car had done and helped this family. And it was a narrative. It wasn't true, but it was beautiful, shot beautifully, sweet, kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's ways to do it, but
Yeah. You know what I find myself seeing ads, and occasionally I'll see one that just is right on the money, but it's very, very few and far between. And I mean on the money, meaning I'm analyzing what they're trying to communicate to what audience, how they're doing it, what's all the in between, and then I'm thinking back behind the scenes of what that team had to do to get there, right?
yeah.
As I'm watching the ad, and there are very few and far between that you can say they nailed it, like, high five.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a lot of them that I will find that are almost make it, but then there's a line or two, or a comma that should have been there that wasn't there, that you're like, the joke just didn't land, kind of thing. If you would have taken that one line out. So there's more of those, and then the rest of them are kind of just a lot of marketing teams out there trying their best and doing what they can with the budget, or not great leadership, or not great creative vision,
or
and I think
the accounts
a
guy,
lot of those that what's that?
or it's the budget guy giving creative decisions now.
Yeah. Well, so it makes me think about this idea of risk, because like I think what happens a lot of times with those teams that almost make it, or you see the potential in what they were trying to do, is that and to the Chrysler ad is a good example of, maybe they succeeded creatively, but maybe there was no return. So then that team didn't get to do that type of thing again. You don't know what happens afterwards, in the line of their thinking. But I think there's a lot of risk that the decision makers, CMO, VPs, whoever's making the decision on the budget and the execution, they have to take a risk financially, creatively. And even if they know philosophically, like we're having this conversation as, two creative people in the industry, they're there a lot of times having all that experience and knowledge and knowing what they should be doing, but are held back from doing it due to whatever constraints. I think that happens probably more often than not. So, talking with you and how you work with your clients, what's this element of risk? Like you said, you're like an absurdist. I think that right there alone can help you to edge your client forward into taking a little bit more bolder steps creatively, or bigger, maybe a bigger production if they need it, or a smaller production if they need it, because that can be a risk for some people too. How do you manage risk with clients and get them to do something that that they need to do?
Yeah, there's it's an insightful question. I like it. There's not a maxim, but it's always this thing I was taught when I went to photo school, and I heard about it from other photographers. And it's like, you go out on an editorial assignment, editorial being magazine, magazines aren't really around anymore, but they were back in the day. And what photographers would do is they would get the image either the magazine wanted or the safe image. And then, so you had that kind of in your back pocket, and you're like, okay, we're good. And then you got an image for you. You did the thing that like you wanted to do, or that even maybe the creative director wanted you to do, but even they know, maybe I can't run it, or it's just something like you had an idea, and then you present them with both, and then you say, hey, like you can do whatever you want. I can't force you, but I think this is the better option. I talked to somebody the other day in advertising. Man, who was it? It was somebody I was talking to, and I was just like, I asked them how many, I was a buddy at a film festival. He designs all their campaigns. And I go, how many ideas have you presented or something like that to clients, and they've turned down like the best decision? He's like, oh, so many. Like sometimes they pick the one that I don't like, but I got to do it. And sometimes
Yeah.
they pick the one that I'm like, great, let's do it.
Hmm.
So I think like I definitely know that I'm in the service industry, really. Like
Hmm.
I'm there to serve my client and they know more about their brand than I do. So I could come up with the
Right.
stupidest, wackiest idea and they're like, no. And I got to go, okay, like you're paying me, man. Like
Yeah.
so I know that, but yeah, I definitely, hopefully they're also, I get a lot of people hiring me because they look at my work and they go, oh, this is like
Hmm.
a little quirky, a little weird. Like we want that.
Hmm.
And it could just be that they want that on set. They want somebody who's going to get along with everybody, who's just going to like be really chill, who's going to
Yeah.
trust their teammates to do their best job. Um, and sometimes that's it. But yeah, I think in getting people to take those risks, I think it's showing them the possibilities, but also having that,
Hmm.
knowing that I trust them, that they know what they're doing, and they trust me, and knowing that like I can push them a little bit,
Yeah.
or I've been doing this long enough, like I know the visual
Hmm.
language and that we can try. Um, and that can be a good thing about the need for more media. You can throw in something that's a little bit more goofy or silly or
Hmm.
humorous now than you could back when you had a brand campaign that was literally like 15 images for a whole year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I hope so.
It did, yeah. And I had one last question here to kind of wrap us up. Um, just talking about the result of what you do, right? Like you work with a lot of clients, you spend a lot of energy creatively trying to understand what they're trying to do and translate it for them so it connects. How have you seen your work transform how a brand connects to its audience?
Hmm, that's a good question. I wish I had a better answer. I don't. A lot of times after the submittal of the images or the whatever, it seems like it's like a black hole. It just
Yeah.
goes off and like gets used, and I'm just like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I've seen my image. I've definitely seen, uh, pat myself on the back here, and I don't think it's, I think that you can be humble and know what you do well.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I've definitely seen my images used and gone, oh yeah, like their website looks better because of my images,
Hmm.
or their brand says a little bit more now that I've been able to kind of like touch that piece of it. Um, so I think, and I mean, that all just comes from, um, like working the style that I like to work of, hire when you can hire the best people possible. I know budget can be a concern, but
Hmm.
hire the best people possible and trust them, and then just let them do their job and stay out of their lane unless I have to go into that
Yeah.
lane. And then know that I'm the steerer of the ship. I'm the steerer of the story.
Hmm.
Um, and I think when you have that, that's when like the images start to speak for themselves and show up. So yeah, I know I went
Great.
off a little topic there, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
a lot of times it's like big organization and gets used internally, and I'm not
Right.
privy to all
Right.
that stuff. So
So, kind of a random thought that came to mind. I was looking at your website. Tell me about this Ethiopia project that you worked on. I saw a lot of images on there, some films. Um, what was that all about? How did that come to fruition?
yeah, that's fun. I always love talking about that. I've traveled a lot in my life. I never thought I'd be like I wasn't like 15. I'm like, I want to travel the world. But
Mhm.
I lived in Ethiopia for 3 years with my wife and my firstborn. And then we came back and had our secondborn and then went back. And I was working with kind of a B Corp for better, or I can't really, there's no term for it in Ethiopia, but
Sure.
it's a benefit corp. And so, our goal is to break even, make a little bit of money, but then also use our influence, and our, God given skills to help the community, but then also to show them the power they had in telling their own stories.
Hmm.
So we worked with like embassies and nonprofits, and we the guy who had been there longer, the owner of the business, started like we wrote grants and we did poetry workshops. We worked a lot with Somalis who get a really bad rap over there, and so we were doing poetry workshops for women, which had never been done, and just trying to like bring bring the culture along with the tides of economic growth and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, that's cool. I've
yeah, it
done
was
some
great.
work. I've done some work with organizations probably similar in countries like that, and I think what's I found interesting when it comes to marketing and all of that is again, back to this idea of connecting donors and volunteers and et cetera, bringing the stories to the forefront of an individual or individuals that are involved on the ground, both people that are volunteering, people that are being served, um, is paramount in that, making that connection.
Hmm.
And I saw, see those images, and without any context, you can see there's a lot of story behind those images. And I think that is compelling. That's the goal, is create images that make you want to know the why, right? Back to the
Hmm.
beginning. The image, when you see it, even with no context, and sometimes less context, the better.
Hmm.
It makes you want to know what happened there, and what, I want to know more.
Yeah.
So I think, to answer my first question for you, I think your transformation is happening. Like, when you look at those images, which is what appealed to me so much in the beginning, is look at these images. It's transforming how those brands are connecting with their audiences.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope so. I think so. Yeah, those were done. I mean, that was done with a lot of patience
Mhm.
and connections, and putting myself in my proper place in a foreign country where I know nothing. So, um, going in there and just go and as much as possible, uh, trying to just learn everything about the culture and be the most differential person to everybody else, so that
Mhm.
they would trust me and know that I wasn't there to uh, slander them, especially in
Sure.
Ethiopia, which is a very hard culture or country to photograph in for lots
Mhm.
of reasons I won't get into here. But um, yeah, just kind of trying to get to know people, having
Probably a
connections.
very delicate
Oh,
type of.
super delicate. Yeah. Email me if you want to know more. Uh, but yeah, just, I mean, because of the political climate there, and the
Yeah.
people, Westerners going over there and taking advantage of them for taking photos and selling them and not giving
Yeah.
them
Right.
money and stuff. So yeah, that was a lot of that stuff. I didn't walk away with as many images, but the one, because of that, because I didn't rush it, but the images I did walk away with, I think hold more meaning. So
Mhm. It's amazing.
yeah,
Well, hey,
thanks.
this has been an awesome conversation. Thanks so much for being on. And I think it's a very unique conversation. I love talking shop with fellow creators, and people who are kind of doing the dirty work on the front lines of creating actual meaningful content. So thanks again.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
people want to connect with you, where can we send them?
I'm on Instagram at B, that's like boy, or Brian, my first name, Carlson,
Bees and
Carlson.
Brian.
Yeah, B as in Brian, Carlson, Carlson images.com, at B Carlson Images on Instagram. And then my website is briancarlsonimages.com. And I've got
Cool.
some, yeah, lifestyle stuff, portraits, and then some
Yeah.
motion.
I definitely suggest everybody take a look at that website and see
Yeah,
what I saw, because a lot of good stuff there. Yeah, thanks again, and we'll put that in the description so everybody can get contacted.
great. Yeah, looking forward to it. Have me on anytime again. It was fun.